Well, hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today for Compelling ECM Trends in 2014. This is the first part of a series we will be doing. There are a number of trends in ECM that we are seeing this year, and we'll be covering 2 of them today and more in the future. So from a very high level, this is our agenda for our session today. We've got about 30 minutes set aside, and we'll do our best to keep to that schedule and get you all back to your day jobs. We will start with a quick overview of RKO and your 2 speakers today. I'll discuss one of the key trends we're seeing in ECM, which is actually the final and slow emergence of ECM in cloud offerings, after which Adam will introduce you all to cognitive systems and the initial ways in which organizations are benefiting from this very exciting and new branch of technology. So who is RKO Content Management Solutions? We are an organization that is 100% focused on enterprise content management, or ECM. We do both vendor-agnostic ECM strategic consulting business, and from a technology perspective, we partner with IBM and other IBM partners to deliver what are truly Tier 1 solutions. Amongst our staff and principals, we have many folks whose experience goes back to the 1990s, so we're proud to say that we have 2 decades of experience. We're a smaller group, but our experience is now approaching 200,000 hours. Now, our number 1 priority in our driving mission is to create what we call elated end users. The idea here being that ECM solutions only drive value and benefit if they're actually used, and they're only used if users see personal benefit in their jobs from using them. Reaching this state tends to make users elated. Finally, you'll notice down in the bottom right that we are now a 2-time ECM award winner from IBM. Only 20 partners around the world are honored each year for delivering exceptional value through content-centric business solutions, and we are very proud to be able to say that we are in that elite company twice now. So here's a sampling of some of those business solutions that have driven real, tangible enterprise value at our clients. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to read through this entire list. I'll leave it up here briefly for you to read. But if you do see something on here that piques your interest, just let us know. Type it into that chat box, and I'll follow up with you to discuss in greater detail. I'm also not going to stay on this slide for too long, but here's a cross-sampling of our customers from a broad geography and range of industry verticals. We have chosen to specialize deeply in enterprise content management rather than specializing in industry solutions for a particular vertical or focusing on a particular geography. So you'll notice here that our clients are from all across Canada and the United States, ranging from finance to government, from energy to retail, to name but a few. So I've been talking for a bit. My name is Rob Dumont, and my primary role at RKO is an account manager, but I've been involved in the ECM space for more than 15 years now in various roles. Adam Wilkins also joins us today. He's our VP of Business Development. So Adam, please say hello.
Good morning, everybody. I'm looking forward to talking a little bit later on in this session.
Thank you, Adam. So moving on to the first of today's topics, which is cloud and ECM. So to set the stage, let's discuss the scope of what I mean by cloud today. Firstly, we're talking about enterprise content management and the cloud, and specifically public cloud solutions. Private clouds are, to an extent, more of an architectural decision, but public clouds are the real game changers. They're the new paradigm where significant disruptions to the status quo are occurring. We're seeing rapid deployments of business solutions, subscription-based licensing, fully managed architecture, etc. Now, secondly, today's presentation is all about RKO's anecdotal experience based on what we're seeing and hearing from our clients and others with whom we work. Our clients are typically mid to medium large organizations ranging from 500 to 10,000 people in size, and generally with more sophisticated enterprise content management requirements. We're talking larger documents, larger volumes, maybe more complex processes that deal with documents, and so on. So our observations come from this frame of reference, and if you fall outside of that, your individual mileage may vary. Now, interestingly, we're seeing that cloud is becoming quite established with many line of business apps. A Cisco study in 2013, last year, found that cloud already represented a significant portion of IT spending in 23% of organizations. The same Cisco study also found that more than half were very satisfied with their cloud. And if you combine those numbers with the people who said they were somewhat satisfied, the overall satisfied group actually represented 86% of respondents. So we're also seeing this in our client base. Many cloud-based solutions are getting a really good foothold and delivering real tangible value to the business. But what we're not seeing is a lot of this in the enterprise content management space. So with all this success in cloud solutions, why are we seeing ECM being less established? Well, there are several reasons, but most of these boil back to bandwidth. It takes a lot more internet, let's say, to move documents to and from the cloud than working with data. So for example, if your customer relationship management system, your CRM, or your ERP is on the cloud and you're working with screens and data, that typically requires much less bandwidth than if you have a high volume scanning operation and you need to push 5,000 or even 50,000 PDFs to the cloud on a daily basis and then retrieve them in a very rapid manner when they're actually required. So with all of that said, we are seeing an increase, though, and one of the first trends that we're seeing today is an increasing awareness of personal cloud. Now, this really stems from the combination of two things. A lot of organizations are going along with BYOD, or Bring Your Own Device programs, and the prevalence of personal cloud on those devices. So pretty much every device that you buy today is going to include one or more personal cloud systems that allow for users to store files and sync them between devices. So some examples of this: if you buy an iPhone, you're looking at iCloud, Google has Google Drive, Microsoft has the OneDrive, what used to be called SkyDrive. There's also solutions like DropBox, Box.net, SugarSync, and people are using these to work with their documents in their personal clouds. It's not strictly enterprise content management. It's more personal syncing of files between their own personal devices and PCs and so on. But because they're working with files, folks are drawing parallels to their corporate enterprise content management systems. And what this is doing is it's setting expectations amongst users for what they would like to see in terms of service levels and convenience. And they're expecting the same levels of service from their enterprise IT departments and their enterprise content management systems. So what this is doing is leading to an increased awareness of the organization as well of what they need to be providing. But going along with this is the governance issues that are occurring. As organizations are seeing increased usage amongst their users of these personal clouds, they're seeing increased storage of business documents out in these uncontrolled personal clouds, and that's leading to an increased awareness of governance, which I'll be covering in just a bit as well in greater detail. Now, the second trend that we're seeing, and this is again not new to cloud, is the increase in prevalence of line of businesses making decisions around IT. So typically, this is referred to as shadow IT. It's where a line of business goes out and makes a decision to invest in a technology-based solution that's typically on the cloud without involving IT or with a very minimal involvement of enterprise IT. And these rogue IT or shadow IT solutions come into place in line of businesses and allow them to do their business, but are not under the jurisdiction or control or visibility of the centralized IT departments. This will seem cheap and cheerful to the line of businesses who are benefiting from the solution, but what it's doing is it's making IT departments both less necessary and less relevant. So the reason for this is that most line of businesses are under pressure to deliver very quickly. They need to respond to changing market conditions and respond to customer requirements and do their work more efficiently, often with less resources. And so it's working very well for them. But these are very focused solutions, and they really are ignoring the E in enterprise, especially with enterprise content management. So as we're seeing line of business apps with ECM integrations or an ECM focus, we're seeing an increase in function-driven information silos that are somewhat isolated and definitely not enterprise systems. So what are these types of solutions? Well, in general, we're seeing enterprise content management taking hold in the cloud in two flavors, or two categories. The first of these, and definitely the more common, are line of business solutions that benefit from document integrations. So an example of this would be, again, a customer relationship management system or an enterprise resource planning system, an ERP, that allows for documents relating to the current record to be uploaded and attached. We call this casual ECM integration. To a lesser extent, this would also apply to cloud-based team sites. And the second one that we're seeing that is increasing actually quite quickly are line of business solutions that have a more document-centric focus. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that the document isn't just a bit of extra information about a record, such as a sale or a customer. Folks are actually requiring a document or even a digital folio or collection of documents in order to process or work at them. An example would be an approval process, such as a loan or applying for a permit from the government, where the folks who are actually approving that and working on it need supporting documents and information and need to route that around. If you're familiar with case management, which is a subset of ECM, this actually would fall under that area. Typically, with these solutions, there's a higher volume of document movement than in the first solution, the casual integration, where more documents are moving to and from the cloud, but perhaps not as high as the scanning scenarios I mentioned earlier, 5,000 or 50,000 PDFs to the cloud. And so we're starting to see these solutions enjoying increasing success. Now, the third main trend that we're seeing, and I've alluded to this before, is again a bit more established in other cloud areas, but just rising to the level of awareness for enterprise content management, specifically because ECM has some very specific nuances. And this is an increasing awareness of how storing content willy-nilly across a broad spectrum of cloud line of business solutions has its drawbacks. It may be possible to quickly implement these solutions, but it comes at the cost of enterprise objectives such as content governance. So we're seeing that executives are increasingly concerned about such topics as security, data usage, data congruence, records management, and other factors of data governance. And as a result, IT is actually being invited to the table more or forced to the table more by the executives. And the decision processes that lead to line of business cloud solution purchases are involving more parts of the business. In these cases, IT is typically playing more of a custodian or guiding role than a technical implementation and support role, and perhaps actually providing more value while being less of a bottleneck. Now, the ultimate outcome of this is that the needs of the line of business, which is rapid deployment that meets their business needs very well, with the enterprise governance and data usage needs are increasingly being aligned, and a balance is starting to be found. With the additional complexities of enterprise content management, the nuances of document and records management versus structured information, there's even more need for appropriate governance in cloud ECM solution deployments, and we're finally starting to see that in 2014. So coming out of this, we actually thought, well, what would we recommend? And these are the 6 recommendations that RKO has for you today. The first is to develop an enterprise cloud strategy and policies. This is absolutely crucial. Cloud is a very useful and positive development in the world of technology. It has a vast potential for benefit, but like many tools, it can do more harm than good if it's wielded incorrectly. And it's surprising how few organizations have actually gone down the path of creating a cloud strategy and cloud policies in our client base. Number 2 is to develop enterprise information governance process and policy. So information governance is really important, and this government must be established up front. Now, what we're talking about here are artifacts such as an enterprise information architecture. These are crucial. Even if you only start with one focused on enterprise content management, you'll find it'll pay huge dividends in the future. The third is set a policy that there will be no shadow IT. IT really does need to be included as a stakeholder for any net new line of business applications that are being put in day forward. This pretty much speaks for itself. A cowboy approach in line of businesses will only lead to a need for significant rework later, result in additional risk and overhead, and really break all of the governance that you're trying to put in place. Now, that applies to new stuff. You should also inventory what you already have in your line of businesses and make sure that there aren't any out there already. And then once you've done that, then you can enforce a light governance on the cloud. And I do want to put stress on the fact that this is light. You want to focus on balance. If you put in too heavy of governance up front, then you'll have trouble enforcing recommendation number 3 around shadow IT, because you will again create the bottleneck that created the problem in the first place. So it's important to start with light governance and to tune that over time. By number 6, auditing and enforcing as needed. You can continue to refine that and to make sure that the governance programs that you have in place and the auditing and enforcing of it is working both for the line of business to allow them to actually do their functions, as well as for the enterprise to meet the goals of the enterprise as a whole. So that's mine. I kind of sped through it. Now I'm going to pass it over to Adam, who's going to talk about something very exciting, or at least I think so, which is cognitive systems. So Adam, I'm going to pass this over to you in 1 second here.
Thank you very much, Rob. So, this is a topic that I'm exceedingly excited about. I've been in the ECM business for 20 odd years now, only 5 more than Rob. And this is one of the more exciting things that I'm looking forward to working with as we move forward. Now, it's a concept that's a little more out there than cloud. Cloud is obviously here; it's here to stay, and it's maturing in its needs for governance and things. What I'm going to talk about now with these cognitive systems is a little more forward-thinking, and we're going to discuss briefly the stepping stones along the way. So there's a lot of stuff in this cognitive systems space to talk about, and I've only got 10 or 12 minutes. So I've got to be brief with most of it. And before I get into what cognitive systems are, we should probably touch on the need for these things. Why are they even being created? Well, one of the astounding facts that are out there is that 90% of the data that's out in the organization, on the internet, on your C drive, everywhere, 90% of what's out there is less than 2 years old. And having been in this business for 20 years, that still astounds me. I mean, there's just so much stuff out there that needs to be found, and most of the stuff that's out there is unstructured. So it's in your file shares that are just jammed full of stuff for the last 20 years. It's in your email system that's bursting at the seams. It's moving across the internet. It's on websites, external and internal to the organization. So this stuff is being unstructured is incredibly hard to search for. So we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years these enterprise search engines and indexing and being able to have a search engine that can go into multiple repositories and bring back consolidated results and all this sort of stuff. And this is all fantastic and good, and organizations are just implementing it now. But it only goes part of the way. So when you've got so much stuff that's out there, being able to feed the engine the right stuff and have it indexed in a meaningful way and to provide meaningful searches gets harder and harder when you consider that the velocity of stuff, when we talk about 90% of the stuff is less than 2 years old, the velocity of content coming into your organization is so fast that these search engines are not going to keep up with it. So how do you go beyond just finding stuff? How do you go beyond putting in some keywords and having a result set of hundreds of documents and then refining that? And products from IBM and Microsoft and other organizations are grappling with this. So we're going to talk a little bit today about what this means and IBM's approach and some other people's approaches to solving some of this. So what we're trying to do is create an entirely new way to get those answers, to deal with the volume of information. So we're really talking about evolving from simply indexing and allowing searches. And the first step towards the cognitive systems is something we've seen for the last few years, and we think is going to get a lot more interest in 2014, and that's the use of analytics engines to better segment, to better tag, to help you get your arms around what content do you have. So you've got 20 years worth of shared drives. What's actually in there? What's useful for you? What can you get rid of? How can you tag it better so it shows up in your search engines in a more meaningful way? And so this is a great first step. That's not where we're trying to get to. And we have a whole webinar on analytics, and Rob can talk about that, and by all means register for our analytics webinar. That's not what we're going to spend a lot of time on today, but it's technology that's here, it's now, it can go through your email system, it can go through your shared drives, and it can really help you get a handle on what you've got and make for more meaningful searches. But imagine, instead of coming up with keywords that you plug into Google or your enterprise search engine, imagine if you could communicate with the computer in a natural manner to find what you need. And despite the ambiguity of the English language, when we talk amongst ourselves, when we collaborate at work, we're able to communicate really complex concepts with fantastic precision and relative ease. So being able to accomplish that with computers is really what's driving this trend towards cognitive systems. And so we're seeing these systems kind of using various combinations of these technologies. So the first one is deep natural language processing. So unlike something like Siri, which we would call, most of you, perhaps if you've got an iPhone, have had experience with Siri or the Android equivalent. I don't think the Android one has a name. we call that shallow natural language processing. So what we need a deeper level of natural language processing. And so the ability to understand the idioms and the idiosyncrasies of the English language. So, when we talk amongst ourselves, if we say things like, we have noses that run and feet that smell, and that seems odd to a computer. A slim chance and a fat chance are actually the same thing, and yet slim and fat are opposite concepts. And a wise man and a wise guy are actually completely opposites, despite the fact that man and guy are the same thing. So, houses burn up and they burn down. We fill it in forms by filling them out. So the English language is full of these strange things that computers have trouble understanding. So, one of the big challenges is just getting them to understand what is natural language at a very, very deep level, much beyond things like Siri and these other technologies that you may have seen commercially. And one of the aspects of that is the concept of being both precise and accurate, which is a very difficult thing to do. For example, if you were to ask Siri, what is, and you can try this at home if you want, what is a 4x4? And if you ask Siri, she's going to turn around and she's going to tell you that a 4x4 is actually 16. When in fact, the answer I'm looking for is not 16 at all, it's actually a truck. And so the answer 16 is a precise answer, but it's not accurate enough. It's not what I was looking for. So how do you train the computer to be both precise and accurate? And that becomes critical in many, many cases. Hypothesis creation. So to use a search engine now, you essentially have to have a hypothesis about marketing issues or safety issues or whatever. You tend to need to have a hypothesis to come up with your keywords to execute your search. With these technologies, it actually creates a hypothesis as you ask the question. It creates a hypothesis in order to determine its answer, and we'll have a look at a bit about how that works later on. And of course, you can't do any of this without a body of knowledge. So these systems need very dynamic ways of collecting information, of learning themselves so that they can provide the most meaningful answers. And you don't see those sorts of things in a lot of the commercial systems. So what IBM did somewhat uniquely was to take all of these things, package them up in a completely integrated way, and produce a system called Watson. Now, I'm going to assume that most people on the call don't remember or have never heard of Watson. Watson was IBM's attempt to produce an intelligent natural language processing system, and the way they wanted to prove that it could work was they wanted to take on the best of the best at Jeopardy. And I put the YouTube link down there if you want to watch the Jeopardy episodes. But over a number of years, they refined the technology, and they got to a point where they could take the best Jeopardy competitors, give Watson these convoluted natural English language questions at the same time that the humans got the questions. And Watson was able to compete toe-to-toe and, in fact, beat the best Jeopardy players. It didn't get all the questions right, but it did, at the end of the day, win the game. So this was an astounding leap forward for the technology, and it shows that it can be done. And so what IBM is doing now is they're starting to roll Watson out, and they've created a whole Watson group, in fact. They're starting to roll Watson out into the real world. And IBM's not alone here. There are other organizations that are taking various aspects of language processing and hypothesis management and all of those things. But Watson seems to be at the forefront of the technology at the moment, combining all of these together in a useful way. So how does this get used in the marketplace? Well, the first area that they've tried deploying this is in healthcare. And healthcare, obviously lives depend on Watson in healthcare if it's going to be used there. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to help reduce the 1,200 deaths that occur every day in American hospitals. So this is just, these stats I'm going to show you now, just in America. So 1,200 people die every day in American hospitals, not from their illnesses, but from preventable issues. So you might go in for an appendicitis to have your appendix removed, and unfortunately you may die from complications. So there are a lot of people that are being perhaps misdiagnosed by the physicians or perhaps receiving incorrect medications during their treatment in hospitals. And this is all occurring because, in part anyway, this is in part occurring because physicians are making uninformed decisions in a lot of cases. So physicians, particularly the time frame seems to be around 5 years is kind of a tipping point. So the newer physicians, they've got lots of fresh knowledge and more computer aware and dealing with things. But once they cross that 5-year threshold, they start to get a little complacent. Perhaps they're confident in their abilities, and they don't have the time to keep up with all the medical research that's going on, which is also increasing at an accelerated rate. So physicians on average spend about 5 hours a month reading medical journals to keep up to date, and there is way more than that being published. So it gets increasingly difficult for them to provide informed diagnosis. So what Watson's doing, imagine now if you have Watson who can take the patient's symptoms, take all of the medical journals that have ever been published on the subject, take the patient's health history, take the family history of that patient, all of the other patients that have had similar symptoms, and process that very, very quickly and provide information for the doctor so that they can be more informed when they make a diagnosis of the patient. And it's hugely powerful, and it's being deployed right now. So this is potentially a huge step forward when it becomes more available across the entire healthcare industry. Another area they're deploying Watson in right now is in the finance space. So every day there are 9,000 pages published of financial news, and there's 5 analyst documents every minute. So if you're in the banking industry and you're trying to make decisions around what the market's doing, it's hugely difficult. There's just too much stuff being published all the time. So what Watson's doing is it's sitting down there, it's reading all of this stuff every day, and it's looking all of the history of what the markets have done based on all of the information that's coming in, and it's able to anticipate what's happening next in the finance space. So these are kind of the 2 areas. There's a lot at stake in both of these areas, and so IBM and the financial and the healthcare industry are kind of putting Watson to work to see how well it behaves in this space, and it's going quite well. So how does this impact you and I, and looking forward? So I've got a quick diagram here of, this is kind of Watson very simply dissected. So when you ask a question of Watson over here on the left, it listens to your question and it says, okay, how could I interpret that? Based on the double meanings and the idiosyncrasies of English, there's different ways I could interpret that. So now let's figure out for each one of those interpretations, what are the answers? Let's look at the evidence to support the answers and create a hypothesis. Let's take all of those hypotheses and score them, and then come up with a resulting answer. So this is kind of how Watson works, and it does it with incredible speed. Now, imagine if you take all of that and you put it up on the cloud. Well, if you think about that for a moment, it's potentially game-changing. So with Watson's ability to digest relevant content, you could pose your question to the cloud and have it delivered to your mobile device almost instantly. And this is where this technology is going to move. So, what they want to see is that Watson is this highly intelligent mechanism for posing questions, and actually you can pose answers as well, and do it right from your phone or your tablet or whatever device you happen to be sitting in front of. And I mentioned that it's not just posing questions and getting answers. You can pose answers and get questions out of this as well. So the engine works in both directions. So you can sometimes tease out really interesting aspects of your business just by saying, here's the results. Why might this be happening? And it digests all of these things and says, well, maybe you've got this wrong with your organization or your product or whatever it happens to be. So potentially game-changing in the cloud space around accessing content and understanding what's out there. So within most organizations, these systems can be hugely beneficial. the reduced IT spending alone, just using the analytics before you even get to Watson, just using the analytics that are there today, you can cut IT spending by 50, 60% just by analyzing what you've got in those drives and getting rid of the stuff that you don't need anymore. People are just throwing money at more disk space because they're scared of going through the stuff. At some point, you've got to go through it. This is the technology to do it, and you'll save money in the process. But when you've got facilities and manufacturing and all of these sorts of things, you've got material safety data sheets, you've got policies, procedures, you've got best practices, you've got training material, you've got operating manuals. You've got all of this stuff that changes every day. There's new operating manuals. There's chemical suppliers are going to change their MSDS sheets. So it's almost impossible to keep up with all of this. But if you can have an intelligent system, I'm going to work on this piece of equipment, what should I think about? And it comes up with all of the safety processes and the training materials and gives you the stuff that you need in a very simple way. It's going to make a big difference to your organization. So I could go on and on. I think I'm probably out of time at this point. I think this is absolutely incredible stuff going forward. Here is our contact information. If you've got any offline questions or you'd like a demonstration or learn a little bit more about it, here's our phone numbers, email addresses, everything you should need. Thank you very much for joining us today. We look forward to helping you out with your issues in the future. Thanks, everyone.